What's up, guys? My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm here with the esteemed Jeremy Parrish. We're here to talk a little bit about Castlevania. We're going to do a full game commentary. Jeremy, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.
You know Castlevania inside and out even more than I do, and so this is going to be a very interesting time for us both. Tell me a little bit about this game. We were talking before we even began recording about the team that made this game.
Well, I was just saying it's crazy how young the people behind this game were when they made it. And I don't know exactly how old they were, but, you know, back in the 80s when people were making video games, they tended to be, like, fresh out of college. And I know the lady who did the music for the game, Kinuya Yamashita, she's, like 40 or something. She's really, really young. She was a college student and did this soundtrack as a freelance project. And so I met her a few years ago at Video Games Live in Tokyo, and she's gorgeous and very, very, like, affable, easy to get along with. And I was just like, my God, you're barely older than me, and you made this incredible soundtrack that I've been, you know, playing and loving for more than 25 years. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, to give a little context about Castlevania, this is the first game in the series that we still know and love today. Came out on Famicom Disk System in 1986, on the NES in 1987 and 1988, depending on if you're in North America or Europe. Spawned two other games on NES after that, Simon's Quest and Dracula's Curse, both of which I think are better games than this, but this is still, I think, one of the hallmarks of what the NES was capable of, and I think one of the games that's, I think, most memorable for me.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at this in the context of when it was released in 1986 in Japan, like, there was nothing else like this out there. I mean, Super Mario Brothers was a year and a half old at that point. So, it's, you know, video games were still very young, very evolving, and the visual style, this kind of, like, pseudo-realistic, very detailed, very gothic look to it, the very precise gameplay, kind of the secrets and everything, like, this was all kind of new and very, very uncommon. So it was, you know, if you played it back when it first came out, you would have been blown away. It was just an amazing game. Yeah,
and I still love it to this day. We're talking about secrets. I do one of the ones here just to show everyone.
Yeah. Did you do all of them?
No, I didn't. I didn't want to waste time. Trying to get the kneeling just right.
Sure.
It's not pixel perfect, and then you have to wait around. I didn't want to make the video any longer than it had to be. And speaking of the video, I did a flawless run all the way to Dracula's stage, actually, stage 6. Then I had some recording problems. Didn't even realize I stopped recording the game. Had some trouble with Dracula, started recording again. So basically the entire 6th stage, except for Dracula's fight, is cut out. So I do apologize about that in advance.
So when you say flawless, that means no hits or just no deaths?
No deaths.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how close to death I was at any particular point. Maybe in Grim Reaper's stage. Realistically, I could probably get 2 Grim Reaper stage without getting hit, but it's pretty hard to not get hit on that stage.
But, you know, the great thing about this game, something that I think makes it something you can go back and play even now, years later, when so many more sophisticated games are available, is that it does have this, like, a real rhythm to it. And once you get into the hook of the game, the groove of the game, if you know it well, oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Took some damage. Once you kind of know the game, you can just breeze through, and it's kind of like a lot of those old video games, like Battletoads even. Like, if you get the rhythm right, then you're good to go.
Right, I agree. It's one of those games that you memorize. When you're a kid, it's gruelingly difficult, especially because there's no password system in this like there are in 2 and 3, and so you have to do it all over again. But when you get the game down, you can beat it in 25 minutes at the most. I mean, it's not a long game at all.
You know the Japanese version of this did have a password system, right?
Did it? No, I didn't.
No, not a password system, but it had saves because it was for Famicom Disk System. So you could actually, like, get to the Grim Reaper stage and not beat the Grim Reaper and say, well, I've had enough for today, and come back later and, you know, jump in straight at, you know, the level 5 or level 6 or wherever you wanted to.
That's awesome. I didn't know that.
And then I think there might have been a password system when they re-released this on cartridge in Japan, but basically we got kind of shortchanged. Like, this game was harder for us because it was just a cartridge and there was no password system at the time.
Yeah, which is so different compared to, you know, we were given the cheap Super Mario Brothers 2 because they thought it was too hard for us, etc. and so on. So it is cool that we got, I guess.
Wait, are you calling the game we did get as Super Mario Brothers 2 cheap?
Well, compared to Lost Levels, I would say that it's
cheap
not.
In what sense?
No. I'm saying that they thought that. Let me rephrase.
Okay.
They thought that Super Mario Brothers 2 was too hard for us, the Lost Levels one that we didn't get until Super Nintendo, and so we got the fake Doki Doki Panic one, which I think is fine. It's a fine game. But
I think actually this is kind of off in the weeds at this point, but I think one of the main reasons we didn't get the original Super Mario Brothers 2 over here is because by the time it would have come out, it would have looked really dated because it was just a ROM hack of the original Super Mario Brothers. So they wanted to give us something a little more, you know, polished. By 1988, we needed a little pizzazz. So I think think Super Mario Brothers 2 did the trick. But, you know, this game actually came out pretty close to its Japanese release in the U.S., so all they did was take out the password or the save system. So we got a pretty accurate version of it.
Yeah, it wasn't too long in between. I'm looking at the dates, September 26th, 1986 in Japan, and then May 1st, 1987, so not long at all. Actually, atypically not long, considering how long we had to wait for a lot of games back in the day.
Yeah, the wait times were pretty crazy, but we did get the NES a couple of years after Japan, so I think there was kind of a delay built into it.
Indeed. So you and I have been talking a lot about Castlevania recently. We both reviewed Mirror of Fate on 3DS for our respective websites.
R.I.P. Castlevania.
And yeah, and we were talking about a lot about how the old games had a great feeling of progression, that they made you feel like you were going somewhere, and it wasn't only just the map that they showed. It really felt like you were progressing. This stage always kind of made me feel that way, like you're through the gates, you're into the castle, now you're kind of getting deep into it. And this stage always was kind of one of my favorites, I think, in the game.
Yeah, you know, this stage, the first stage is really, really easy. Like, you really have to go out of your way to die. I guess maybe if you screw up in the Fishman's lair underneath the castle, but yeah, there really aren't a lot of threats. But in this one, you get to open pits, you have Medusa heads flying in their crazy sine waves as you're on moving platforms. So there are a lot of dangers coming at you from a lot of different directions, a lot of things to manage, both environmental, like these plunger things, and also the moving platforms and pits that didn't appear in the first stage. Plus, enemies are kind of combining with that to make it extra difficult. So yeah, this is kind of the first test of your mettle, and the game gets progressively more difficult as you go. I see that you're sticking to holy water in this one.
Yeah, I just, you know, when I was a kid, on this particular stage, I would actually opt for the watch and just, you know, freeze time, because it does actually work on Medusa. But the holy water is just like the best weapon in this game. You can, after you beat the vampire bat in the first stage with the axe, you really just want to stick with this weapon. It works on everyone.
I always like the triple boomerang personally, but both of them are effective, and that's what's nice about this game is even though it is so limited, and when you really actually stop and play, like you said, it's super short, even though it took us so long to beat when we were kids the first time. Like, there is a lot of choice, a lot of variety. You can play the way you like to play. You can use as much finesse or as little finesse as you like. You can, you know, cheese it with the holy water or try to, you know, take everything on with a whip. This is where the game gets really hard. Like, immediately out of this door, all of a sudden there's those little stupid fleamen. I hate those guys.
Yeah, those guys are the worst. You got to hit them, like, you know, you got to hit them right away.
As soon as they jump.
Yeah.
Otherwise, yeah.
You're in for a world
like,
of hurt.
one of those little guys can kill you. It's ridiculous. But yeah, as you were saying about the sense of progression, I really love each stage has its own look, but also, in addition to that, its own context. So, you know, the first stage is just kind of the entryway, and then the second stage, it's more like, you know, kind of like an internal gallery, as you were saying. You're through the gates. But it sort of ends on this long hallway, and then you end up in like a cathedral, so it's, you know, like you've kind of entered the cathedral portion of the church or of the castle, and then here you're outside again, and it kind of looks like nighttime with the blue sky and the orange bricks, like moonlight splashing onto the bricks, and you go across these you know, bridges and kind of collapsed parapets and things like that, and it all kind of makes sense. Like, everywhere you're jumping lines up, you're like, oh yeah, there must have been like a floor here, but then it fell and crumbled.
Right. I mean, the game invokes an incredible amount of imagination. I mean, this is one of those games that we were talking about last week where you sat in the back of your mom's car, you poured over the instruction manual, you talked about it with your friends at school, you were making your own story. The game didn't really explain much to you, but it gave you a lot to look at, and I think that it was exciting. You have like the crumbled statues here.
Right, and the ivy covered bricks.
Yeah, I think I get screwed up here if I remember correctly.
Man, that guy, he's wall jumping. I thought only Mario could do that.
Yeah, I was trying to get fancy. Yeah, I think I get pretty screwed up here. Yeah. Yeah, I was trying to do my fancy move of jumping up and planting the holy water on the platform above, and the flames actually rise above. One of the cool things that I love about this is the background too. There's a super iconic shot a little further ahead where you see the castle, you know, like the turrets and stuff. And
I've read so many articles about that. I'm not even going to talk about it this time, at the risk of repeating myself. Yeah, I love the way this level is designed, because you have things like that staircase where you had a lot of trouble, because you do move more slowly and more deliberately. You're really limited when you move upstairs, and you have the Medusas that are moving in that sine wave pattern. So you really have to think about how they're going to appear, when they're going to appear, how quickly you can move to evade them. You have things like that skeleton dragon cannon trying to blast you into a pit with your recoil. Like, just little things like that are not quite unfair, but definitely really challenging and really keep you on your toes. Like, this is not Ghosts and Goblins. Like, it's never unfair, it's never random, but it's always just tricky enough that it keeps you, you know, guessing, and you have to really be on your toes and be sharp.
I agree. Yeah, it's beautifully made, and I love this too. Like how these statues are in the background; they're really just part of the background. But the game designers were clever enough to make the enemies still interact with them, and I love how those like birds perch on it. Here's the iconic shot of the castle. I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, and you don't really think about it now. You're just like, oh, that's neat, and you walk past. But then, you know, later in the game, as you go up the kind of the turret to Dracula's lair, you're like, wait a minute, I saw that before. So it's this kind of like this sense of a goal. You're halfway through the game at this point with these bosses, and that's showing you the second half of the game, like where you have to go.
Now I'm gonna cheese the
My
mummies.
goodness.
Why not?
Something that's really cool about this battle, though, is you do have a choice. Like, if your life is really worn down, like it is there, you can get that meat. But then if you get that meat, then you can't jump up and be above those guys. So it's a balance. Like you say, do I want to restore my health and put myself at greater risk, or do I kind of want to stay out of the fray and attack them safely? Of course, if you have holy water, then who cares?
Yeah. You got to jump out. I mean, I like to, you know, if I'm playing strictly with no sub-weapons, which is fun in a way to play. It's really hard. You can do that. I would have a lot of problems with Frankenstein without the holy water, though, which is this next stage. And this, again, I love another progression.
How does he survive that fall?
I don't know. They never make that clear.
Like, he can't survive falling into a pit any other time. Oh, well. That's the like, I've spent too much time wondering about that. It's kind of pathetic.
So here we are. We're underground. We're dealing with some of the fishmen. And the bats here are a little annoying. They keep coming. It's kind of like the New Game Plus kind of mode in this game where the bats are always coming from the right.
Yep.
But in this stage, it can frustrate you a little bit with the platforming. Yeah, I actually let it go. I try to time it nicely.
Yeah, I mean, the timing on the bats can be really tricky with the moving platform. And this is really tricky the first time because it doesn't look like it's interactive scenery, but those stalactites can actually scrape you off the platform and knock you into the water. So you have to duck to get beneath them. But yeah, it doesn't communicate very well. Like, you see those guys jumping up into the bricks, and there are other places where you see brickwork like that, like, you know, holding up the blocks down there, and you can pass through it.
Right.
So, like, that's a kind of a visual design glitch, I think. But, you know, no one's perfect. And considering all the things that this game did as a first, or did well, that no one else had done, I'm willing to forgive it a few little oversights.
I agree. I agree with that completely. That always did frustrate me as a kid. Like, why are these fishermen getting caught on this rock? It just doesn't look very elegant. But the rest of the game does. This part certainly looks elegant. I love coming up the stairs. The music changes. You have to deal with all the birds dropping the flea men, the crumbled ruins that you're walking past. It's just absolutely beautiful for an NES game.
Yeah, this level is actually kind of boring if you know how to approach it. Basically, just walk up and hit the flea men as soon as they land. There's no real threat here. But if you don't know how to deal with it, then it's incredibly overwhelming. Something I really like, and I'm sure we'll talk about this when you get around to Castlevania 3, but Castlevania 3 revisits like every single stage from Castlevania in some form, including that section, and they always put a twist on it, and they always kind of upgrade it and make it more challenging and just more thoughtfully designed. So it'll be interesting to go back to things like, you know, that kind of boring walk across the courtyard and how that's revisited in one of the latter stages of Castlevania 3. Like, it's a... I don't know. I think there's a lot of history in this series, and even from the beginning, it sort of kept circling back around to say, hey, you remember this? Here it is, but better.
Yeah, I absolutely adore that too. I can't wait for us to sit down and do Castlevania 3 because that really is such a fantastic, really one of the best games I think of all time. It's such a special game, extraordinary game. Introduces a lot of great characters to us too as well. But here we are with another boss battle, Frankenstein and his little Igor friend. Now again, the holy water here is pretty integral to keeping him frozen.
Yeah. I
still let them go. I actually think I screwed this one up a little bit, but it's fine.
This is absolutely the sticking point for the game. It doesn't matter, you know, how easily you got through the first 3 stages. This is where everyone gets snagged the first time through. And I had friends who never saw any of the game after this because they just couldn't figure out the pattern to beat Frankenstein. You made it look pretty easy here, but if you don't freeze them with a holy water, that little Igor will jump around and shoot fireballs at you.
Yeah,
and
it's awful.
He's very aggressive and will just kind of like bump into you. And of course, you take damage from that, not him. And Frankenstein himself, the monster, not that difficult.
No, he just stands there.
It's just that little bastard jumping around. I hate that guy.
Now, this stage I absolutely adore, and I love the music, the look of it. I always kind of thought it was like the dungeons, like the torture chamber. I don't know, really know what's going on in this stage, to be honest with you. Have any insight into that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely it kind of makes sense. Like, this is sort of a dungeon, sort of a torture chamber, and also sort of a labyrinth, and it makes sense that Frankenstein's monster is right outside this kind of creepy laboratory full of dead people. Like, they probably made Frankenstein's monster right here, and then just kind of put him out into the back door to guard it. So I don't know if they actually thought that far ahead, but if not, it turned out to be pretty nice kismet.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the most difficult part of the game is on this stage 2, not on the next stage. Because you won't see the next stage because, like I said, I screwed up the recording of it. But there's really hard parts, but it's really all about running. Just run. But on this, there's a part at the end of this stage that I really think is like vintage Castlevania.
That you really dislike?
That I like it in the sense that you have to figure out how to do it.
Oh, okay.
That is this part is a snag for sure.
Yeah, actually, the part you're talking about is really, really easy with the triple boomerang, more so than the holy water, because you can. Well, we can talk about it when you get there, but basically, it's one of those examples of different weapons serving different purposes at different points in the game, and kind of knowing the best weapon for the situation. So there's always a lot of strategy with this game. Again, despite the fact that it is a very kind of small 6-level compact game.
Yeah, this is a part where strategy. I try to. Yeah, this guy's gonna screw me up. But then once I try to ignore this guy as best I can, just ignore him, leave him alone. And then you can get this guy to go up, scroll off the screen if you're quick, or you can just kill him. But I think I kill him here because I have holy water. Let's see.
Yeah, the Axe Knights are a this kind of threats you face constantly change up throughout the game, and these guys are different because they have that shield, so you actually have to wear it down before you can hurt them. Once you actually do that, they're not that difficult, but at the same time, they're posing two different kinds of threats to you, the high threat and the low threat. And because they take so much damage to beat, they're just kind of, drawing your attention as other things are kind of surrounding you and attacking from different angles.
Yeah, they're obnoxious. By the way, I want to say that the recording froze at that point, so I had our videos stitched together pretty seamlessly, actually, impressively seamlessly. Just a little bit of a glitch there. I'm glad I noticed that when I was recording. I didn't notice the second time.
Yeah, so here's the laboratory. So yeah, this is probably where they made Frankenstein's monster. Shipped them out.
And it's very cool. Again, it tells a story should you want to explore that story. If you're just playing it to play the game, that's cool too. But there is so much heart in this game. There is so much to see and imagine. It really is one of those games where, before they had the room or the means to tell a story, telling your own story. I think this is one of those quintessential games that lets you do that.
Yep. I mean, it doesn't have a single line of dialogue, but there's still definitely this narrative going through the game. And a big inspiration for this game were the Universal monster movies from the 50s and 60s, those, classic black and white films, that and, Hammer horror films. So you see that in the credits roll with a bunch of, references to old movies. But this is very much that kind of quintessential mad scientist lair. You expect to see some Van der Graaf generators or something with electricity crackling back and forth. It really kind of captures that atmosphere. And again, yeah, I mean, this kind of visual design was just unheard of in home games back then. We were barely out of the era where, backgrounds in video games were just a single solid color.
Yeah, and this game just has such impressive, it's just impressive in every sense. I think for, like you said, the time it came out, it's quite the feat, the technical feat, and I think, and the narrative feat as well. Get the wall meat, need that. Go up. Now, this is the part of the game I was talking about that I think is really super difficult. You can do it well if you just time it right. And I didn't.
Yeah, the boomerang is definitely the key to getting through this. If you have it, if you have a triple boomerang, because you just throw it out and because it hits him and then comes back to you, basically, you don't even have to worry about the Medusa heads because they'll run into the boomerangs. And once you hit him enough, his shield breaks, and the boomerang will pass through him instead of deflecting off of that. So then it gets even more range. And, of course, the boomerang's really good against death here. Not to spoil the surprise, but yeah, the holy water is really handy against death. Because this is a really, really hard fight.
Yeah,
there's so many items appearing, so many objects appearing randomly. Wow, you didn't even get to a second wave of scythes. That's crazy.
Yeah, the sides are a problem. That's why my brother would always bring the boomerang with him. He would be able to do it. It's just so hectic. That is cheap, but gets the job done.
Right.
And that's the way I feel about every boss fight in this game from 2 to 5, I guess, in terms of stages with the holy water, and even the end of the Dracula boss fight, which we're going to get to now.
Yeah, the battle with death is if you have the boomerang, you basically just fill the screen with as many boomerangs as possible and kind of hope and pray that you can duck out of the way of the sickles before they home in on you.
So again, we skipped about a minute worth of gameplay here. Again, iconic scene here. I love it. But again, I had some recording problems, so we did miss some. Really, nothing too exciting actually.
Yeah, the most important thing about Stage 6 is that it introduces the classic clock tower, which is a staple of Castlevania. But interestingly, the clock tower now everyone associates with Medusas, but it's actually just Eagles and Igors in this one.
Yeah, a little more simple. So there's two schools of thought here, as you know, Jeremy, but a lot of our listeners here, our viewers might not know. You can come in with the boomerang, leave the leftmost candle free, which holds the holy water because you're going to need it for the second form of Dracula. And you can actually chuck the cross at Dracula's head or use it to hit him right in his stomach and block the fireballs. But I like to just jump over them.
Yeah, I always do the jumping thing. The fireballs move in a pattern that you can jump over perfectly if you know the timing.
You just can't go too early. And I think I might at some point because then they arc upwards.
Right.
And will run right in. You can only get hit 4 times in this fight, too, so I think. Yeah.
Yep, that's, 3, and then the 4th time you're dead. So, yeah, Destro, I guess, quit Cobra. And
It is a bizarre design for Dracula, I think, but it's cool. It's still cool. It's still
I
very
guess
memorable.
I can't tell what his face is supposed to be. I guess it's like just a guy's face with a hooked nose, and he's got the black hair behind him. But yeah, it's a strange look.
He got hit there. Yeah, one more hit, head pops off. And then here you use the holy water to try to freeze the dude. You have to hit him in the head. This guy's a pain in the ass if you don't have the holy water, so that's why they give it to you, I think. But, if you die before you get to the stage, which I did, then your hearts are really at a minimum, and you got to really be kind of judicious with how you're using the holy water, or you're going to be in trouble.
But yeah, fortunately, the holy water does freeze him. It makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, it's actually, once you figure it out, a pretty underwhelming fight.
One of the few mercies that the game gives you is that when you die against Dracula, even if you have to start over, you don't go back to the beginning of Stage 6. You start always right outside his chamber.
Right.
So, first time I fought him, it took me like an hour and a half just to beat him. But at least you don't have to play through up to that point. You can just keep, smashing your head against that brick wall until you win.
So here we have the ending, the typical castle crumbling into the ground.
So many castles collapsed on the NES. Every Ninja Gaiden game had that too.
Yeah, it's a very, very common image. And here, as you were saying, Jeremy, is a lot of call-outs, some vague, some not vague at all, except for James Banana, to horror stars, directors,
yeah,
writers.
Christopher B., obviously, Christopher Lee.
Just,
Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, not very subtle. And, this was back in the era where they didn't actually give credit to the people who made the game because I guess...
They were afraid of poaching, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So it took a long time for people to track down the names of the people who made this game, but, they were just kind of making a cool game about the movies they liked, and it turned out to be a classic that lasted for years and years.
It's very cool. Well, Jeremy, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having
We'll do
me.
Castlevania 2 and 3 very soon. For all things Castlevania and video games, do keep it tuned to IGN.